I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Mayor and Council for Monday, September 19th, 2016. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Present are Mayor Marion Galbraith, Deputy Mayor Keith Hedrick, Councilors Andrew Alvento, Jill Rusk, Stephen Sheffield, Conrad Heed, Lawrence Garish, Finance Director Ron Uhas, and Clerk Deborah Patrick.
Thank you. Please stand to salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Recognitions, awards, and memorials. Seeing none. Receipt of citizens' petitions and comments. Seeing none, we'll skip over item number 5 and go to the approval of minutes. May we have a motion to approve the minutes of the September 6th, 2016 special mayor and council meeting?
Second.
Are there any additions or corrections? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining. Councilor Ilvento.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say that I attended the services for Ed Kolnaski, and just like when Catherine passed away, it was one of those moments where you realize just how much one person can do for their community. So, you know, we send our best to the Kolnaskis, and we thank Ed and Catherine, because without everything they had done, I don't know if Groton would be the place that it is. And over the last couple of days, I saw all the things people were writing about Ed's impact at Westside, and it just kind of reminded me of what importance teachers have. And I think it was a nice way to kind of realize what we do, and no one had a bad thing to say about him, and we remember him and Catherine.
Very special man. Thank you. Councilor Rusk?
Thank you. On September 7th, Group 1 meeting met. On Group 7th, the EDC met. We didn't have a quorum at the time, but there was a good discussion. We are looking for a new chair for the Economic Development Committee, or Commission, and looking for new recruits. So if you're interested in joining the Economic Development Commission, please contact the mayor's office. And we discussed incentive programs and ideas on how to, improve Thames Street. So that was really the focus. On September 12th, there was a Group 1 meeting. We discussed ordinances, number 116 and 117 with Chief Davern, and decided that no recommendations for change were to be made.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilor Sheffield.
Nothing to report.
Councilor Heed.
I also attended the group meeting with Councilor Rusk and Councilor Garish on the 12th.
Thank you very much. Councilor Garish.
I was there.
Okay.
I can attest that they were there.
Everything they said was true.
Well, we don't want to push it. But it was a good meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
See, usually that's the stuff he says about me, so, you know.
Well, I haven't got to you yet.
Deputy Mayor Hedrick.
Thank you. On the 7th, I attended a school liaison committee meeting. It was a good meeting. A lot of good information came out of that. One of the things that came out is that we are still in a racial imbalance in one of the schools. I don't remember now the school, but it's like 3% or something like that. And the town council has approved the wording for the referendum, and now it's going to go to the voters as regarding the school. And on the 12th, I attended the final Mother Bailey House committee meeting, and we finalized our recommendations and proposals, and that'll be coming to the council. Should be at the
I haven't seen it yet, so.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
Okay, never mind. It'll be coming.
It probably,
soon.
if it gets to us in time for the committee of the whole, it'll be here for the committee of the whole.
And that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you very much. City Clerk Deb Patrick.
I have nothing, thank you.
Finance Director Ron Uhas.
Nothing to report.
Okay, a couple of things. Councilor Rusk mentioned that we have an opening on EDC. We also have openings for Harbor Management, Parks and Recreation, Planning, and Zoning. So if people are interested in any of those, in serving as committee members or commissioners, depending on whether it's a commission or a committee, there is a place online where you can download the application and fill it in, and we'd love to hear from you. So please let us know if you're interested. Just to bring the council up to date on a couple of things, the water taxi ended its run for this year on Sunday. We performed up to expectation for this summer. We knew that it was going to have to be subsidized for the first couple of years, but it has met our expectations, and it was really nice to see people on it a lot. They started the river tours, which were popular, and during the Connecticut Maritime Heritage Festival, they had quite a bit of business. It is free for active military personnel. So they were able to move people from the Ramage to downtown New London, which was really great. And it was well used over that weekend. Also to let you know where we are with the USS Groton Sail Foundation. We are working with we're working on seeing if we can acquire a site. We're not in a position to say where that site is publicly yet because we're looking at acquisition, but we are a 501c3 now. We are accepting donations, so that is underway. We have a couple of things that we wanted to talk about here tonight. One of them is the demolition permit. So each of you should have a copy of our current demolition permit. And there has been a change in the state statutes relative to demolition permits, which means we might want to recommend some changes to our demolition permit ordinance as a response to that change. And Carlton is here tonight. Carlton, do you mind bringing your chair up to sit next to Ron Uhas to talk about this?
Good evening.
Good evening.
So as the mayor said, you have a copy of the demolition ordinance and Public Act 16-9. So we're going to work just a little bit backwards on this. So we're going to start with 16-9, the Public Act, and what changed, what is going to change as of October 1st. And it's in blue. I think it's, I did it color copied in blue. And it said if a waiting period is imposed by a town, city, or borough pursuant to subsection B of this section, the person seeking the permit shall take no action toward demolition of the building structure or part thereof, including, but not limited to, site remediation and asbestos abatement during the waiting period. So, with that being said, we have ordinance 200. This will come in effect, as I said, October 1st of this year, and we have a 90-day waiting period on our ordinance for the demolition. Typically, what has happened in the past is that the vendor, owner, whoever was doing this demolition would come in with the proper paperwork and get started on the asbestos abatement or any environmental abatement. I mean, asbestos seems to be the more common term we see with items. And would then wait out that 90-day period for the demolition permit while they were removing that. With this new law, they won't be able to do that at all. So we could possibly hold up a owner from trying to get rid of their product, the product that we do want them to get rid of, waiting for that demolition permit because of the state statute. Nothing that we've done, but because of state statute. I'm not sure how this came about. We didn't propose it as meaning as a city or a town on there, but it came out of some division out of the legislators, and now it's a law. So I have some recommendations that I'd like to at least just talk about and have any questions. So as we reformat the ordinance, I kind of get a cue of where you'd like to go with certain things on there. So the first thing I'd like to do is bring down the 90 days. By state statute, currently, if you come in with a building permit or a demolition permit or a plumbing permit, I have up to 30 days to either deny or approve your permit on there. So we do have a 30-day piece in there. It's not instantaneous on there. A lot of times we like to be able to do that for you, but we sometimes just can't. And the other piece that would be benefit to us to remove is the publication. Currently, our ordinance has us publicizing at our expense someone's demolition permit for over 5,000 square feet on here, which and we have to do it within a certain amount of time. So if someone comes in on the wrong day, on a holiday, we're challenged to get this sometimes into the day paper quick enough, because you need so much lead time to get it to the paper, write-up of it, proof of it. It goes back and forth a few times before we get it there. So those are the two larger items that I see that I'd like to make a recommendation to curb down one to the 30 days, which is state statute for any building permit or any application that you would come into, and remove the publication portion of that also.
The other thing I think we need to look at is item number 6. Item number 6 allows the building official to waive the waiting period. However, it doesn't allow him to then waive the publication and everything else. So I think that that in item number 6, if you're going to waive the waiting period, then you're going to want to waive the requirements in items number 3, 4, and 5. This doesn't allow that, so that's another amendment we would probably want to make to this, and we'd probably want to make all amendments at the same time, since there's an expense to changing every ordinance. Feedback on Carlton's suggestions or recommendations. What we would do then is we would bring this back to you in written form for the committee of the whole, and then we'd have our, if you decide you want to do this, we'd have our first vote on August 3rd, October 3rd, I believe it is, and then the second one would be in November.
Does this have to go to any committee, like building and zoning, or?
It doesn't have to, because you can always act as the committee of the whole.
Okay.
So in this case, in order to be timely, I think we would probably just do it as the committee of the whole.
Just as we made the ordinance, there was no zoning board or planning and zoning it went
That's
to.
what- yeah, that's what I meant.
It was an ordinance.
Yeah, okay.
Is there any feedback on the recommendations? Are you okay with them? Yeah, Deputy Mayor Hedrick?
Yeah, I'm okay with the recommendations. The subparagraph B of the state statute talks about not more than 180 days. So if we can go less. Up at the top,
Yep.
Yes, we can go
waiting
less.
period of not more than 180, so we can go less.
Yes,
And so you're looking to get rid of the 90 days and just stay with the 30,
correct.
okay? I don't
Get rid
have
of
any-
it completely or have some leeway?
That's up to the counselors here. I mean, my recommendation is the 30 because of that's what happens to coincide with what I have to do with any building permit application.
So you can't think of any situation in which we'd want to have more than 30 days to be able to look at the demolition of a building, historic purposes or anything?
Well, with some of our pieces in here, we do have the third-party review, which would stay. And if it was in third-party review, because it was doing that, you don't have to give a permit out on there. You would just write a letter to the applicant stating that the third-party review currently is being performed, but is not done yet. So you could get an extension of
But if there was
time.
no third-party review, you can't think of any situation in which we'd want to take more than 30 days to be able to look at whether a demolition is in the best interest of the community or the economic development or anything like that.
I did not think of one, no.
Yep, Deputy Mayor Hedrick.
Thank you. If we eliminate the 90 days and just go to the 30 days, and there was a situation where we needed more than 30 days, could we then default to the state statute or not anymore?
No, you'd have to have it in your
Since we've
ordinance.
been more restrictive, and it's not in the ordinance, right? It needs to be in the ordinance.
So if there was some, we'll use the word environmental concerns that we didn't think had been addressed in there, I could deny the application, any building official could deny the application because there was not enough information to do a full review. If the building official felt that there was something that was more than what we normally would have seen in a demolition permit.
And then once they resubmit the demolition, a new permit, then the clock starts again.
It's not, they have to resubmit the information. They don't have to put in a new application, they just resubmit the missing information that should have been with the packet.
Would the clock then restart the 30-day?
Typically, yes, that's what has happened. But if you're down to those kind of nuts and bolts that are left in there, and you don't have to wait out that 30 days, right? Because you know what information you're trying to find. We're not trying to hold anybody up in any way. But
Right.
if there's true information missing that we're very concerned about, then we're gonna call it out.
So if there were an historic building that was seen to have great value, and there was a huge hue and it was owned privately, and somebody wanted to take it down, there was a huge hue and cry about wanting to preserve this building, we would have no recourse other than to just decide within 30 days.
On a historic structure inside a historic district, there are state statutes that take over.
But if they're not, it's not in an historic district?
They still have to go, we have their property down on Pleasant Street. I call it the Blue House. That's got an emblem that says Groton Banks on it. I know some of the people that have started to look at that because the bank is getting rid of it. We've told them that they need to talk to the Cultural and Tourism Group because of that. That whole Groton Banks went in as a overall application, but there's nobody overseeing it except for them, to see if that house can be demoed without any problems. We've had to go reach out to them before. We've had applicants use that against us trying to take down a property one time, and the Historic and Cultural came down and looked at it and said, no, that's not of historical keeping. Go ahead, take it down. So they have that, we have that avenue for them to look at.
But only if it's in an historic district.
That's correct.
So like, and I'm just gonna say, I'm just gonna think out of the box here. But if somebody privately bought the Branford House and then said, we're gonna tear it down, and people in the community said, oh my gosh, let's think if there's another way to repurpose this or reuse this or something like that, we'd still have to decide in 30 days. We'd have no leeway.
Well, that's a state of Connecticut property.
I know, but I'm saying
Yes.
if it were privately owned.
Yeah, oh,
If it were
okay.
privately owned and people said, oh my gosh, they're gonna tear down the Branford Manor and we'd like to, isn't there some way to save this? And we'd still have to act within 30 days if we change the ordinance.
Yes, or 90 days if you keep it.
Okay.
And why would we want to restrict ourselves to only 30 days? Why not keep 90 or even?
Because I can't get the owner of a property, I will not be able to give the owner of the property the right to even remove any of the environmentals that have nothing to do with the demolition.
Unless you waive the waiting period.
Correct. That's the statute change that we did. The statute now is gonna say October, you can't remove any environmentals. Nothing can happen if you have a waiting period, ordinance waiting period.
But if you waive the waiting period, they could?
For me to waive the waiting period, that's a great question. For me to waive the waiting period would be a little upsetting from a lot of people's perspective. I would then have to defend every time, why did I let Mrs. Jones go in 30 days and I held Mr. Smith at 90 days? And then I have to defend that each and every time. So what the ordinance says is what the ordinance is gonna be, instead of me trying to defend why I let somebody else go before somebody else. If we have an imminent danger of collapse, the ordinance told us that we have the right to move on, as well as the state statute on there.
Yes, I'm sorry, Councilor Avento.
Thank you.
I was reading something.
That's okay. I just want to clarify this. So the new state statute basically says that if we have a waiting period in our ordinance and this house is full of asbestos, those people now won't be able to remove the asbestos or whatever it is, and the building can be knocked down?
If you're coming in with a demolition permit, that's
Yep.
correct. There will be no activity.
Now, if they weren't coming in with a demolition permit, they could take out their asbestos.
Okay, hold on. I just got to make sure because this doesn't make any sense to me. So if my house is full of asbestos and I want to rip it down and I ask you, but we have a waiting period, the people can rip down the house that's full of asbestos without removing the asbestos first?
No.
No.
Okay. So it's the other way around.
They can't do anything.
They can't do anything. Okay, I misunderstood that because I was going to say that doesn't make any sense. It seems like that's counterproductive to what you'd want to do. Okay, I just misunderstood.
Currently, right now, with our regulations, you can, without the statute being in place, right, we can get the PCBs, the asbestos,
Yeah.
whatever product that's in the building, out of the building while we're waiting for the waiting period.
Gotcha.
Once this statute takes effect, no activity can happen.
Okay. That's what I just had it backwards. I just wanted to make sure, because that didn't make any sense to me the way I was thinking about it.
But we're being proactive, trying to make sure that we entertain and keep the businesses, customers, residents going as fast as we possibly can,
Right,
but safely.
right.
And that's what that 30 days kind of does, is give us a chance to review something and realize if there's information missing or not. No different than a 1,000-page permit coming in here for a new building. I got 30 days to react to this.
So I guess what we would like is some sense of direction as we contemplate coming with changes to this. Counselor Heed.
I'd support the 30 days, but I guess the only question I would have is there a situation where 30 days would be too rushed? Where you might want to say 30 to 60, not 30 to 90, but 30 to 60 or something?
Well, no, I did not think of any situation that would warrant that. But if the council or whoever's guiding this through wants a 45-day, or it's hard to be judgmental to be 30 to 60. You go to the maximum day, that way you never have to defend that, except that I have always been consistently treated the ordinance this way.
What if the ordinance had very limiting and restrictive, or I shouldn't say very limiting, but very specific guidelines that would guide the determination of whether it went from 90 to 30, if it was waived, if the period of time were waived, so that it wasn't a matter of subjectivity, but it had to meet very objective guidelines? Would that take away some of that, Mrs. Jones and Mrs. Smith?
Yeah, because now I've got a defined set of rules that would make that possible to do. But remember, anytime that we add on, nobody can remove any of the environmentals.
Other questions? So a sense of direction.
I would go with the 30. That's his recommendation.
I agree, because it just makes me concerned that it could cause more problems than it's worth. And if the state's not gonna, the state's not gonna back you on that unless you have a really good reason, it seems.
Well, the state doesn't mind if you have a waiting period. That's not the problem.
That's
The
correct.
question is so we did have a situation, the reason we have this ordinance, as you guys will remember,
Yep.
was because of a situation where there was a building that was coming down and we wanted a waiting period to see if there was another purpose for that another use for that building.
Yep.
As
So-
well as the environmentals there were a tremendous amount of environmentals that happened with that.
We would not be allowed to do that again.
Right.
So that's what you have to consider. You need to know that once you go to 30, you're at 30. There is no situation under which you could extend that unless that needed a third-party review or there was something that they
Missing.
did not put in the building permit application that they needed to do.
So even under the 90, even under the way it's written now, you can issue it or allow it before 90 days.
Yes, it gives me some pieces to this, to issue it before 90 days. But then I have to defend that each and every time. How come I let this one happen before that one?
Well, there probably would be a reason for
There
not
may
letting
be,
this
but
one do it
yeah.
versus that one.
But I would have to always keep that.
I just don't understand why you want to limit it to, for your own benefit, why you want less time. But
I'm concerned because I guess I misunderstood kind of what the deal with the state was. Now I understand a little better, but it just seems like if we have a situation that happens again where this came about, that original plan that we were given for that building was very haphazard, and that's why we were so concerned about, and it wasn't very clear, if I remember correctly, what was going to happen. So I'm just having a hard time understanding why we'd change it. If we leave it the same, then nothing can happen during the waiting period, correct? Nothing at all. So Okay, so then they still want to demolish the building. We give them the approval after a certain amount of time, or you give them the approval after a certain amount. Then they can begin.
With their environmentals or whatever they need to do.
So what's the impact of that happening?
Well, so the other side of this coin is that if you have 90 days, the only thing that it allows you to waive the 90 days for are if all the other appropriate alternatives have been considered, the demolition plans and supporting documents comply with the ordinance, the waiting period is unlikely to change the outcome and may delay new construction. So those are the three conditions under which you can waive it. So if it doesn't meet those three requirements, then they have to wait 90 days before they can do anything with the building, including taking out asbestos tiles or the lead that surrounds the windows or. So, I mean, there are two sides to this. You just need to consider both sides as you make that decision.
And I'm making you aware of the state statute change to see if this now coincides with what we thought the ordinance created at that time. Before, they used to be able to get rid of those other items, and now that's going to be a tremendous hold. It could be a tremendous holdup for anybody.
Well, with the state Public Act, I mean, you still have what you had before, even though they've made a change. I mean, you still got your ordinance. I mean, you don't have to go by that.
Oh, yeah, oh yes, I do. I have to follow statutes.
He would not be able to let them do any environmentals during that 90-day waiting period.
Even if your ordinance allowed it?
Right, the ordinance can't supersede. The ordinance can only, state statutes allow municipalities to do certain things, but you can't go against the state statute.
Kind of the hierarchy is statute, ordinance, regulations. That's kind of the hierarchy of our law.
I'm sorry, Councilor Rusk.
That's okay. Thank you. My concern about waiting 90 days would be from the economic development perspective. If you have somebody who wants to come in and take down a building to bring in and build another building, we're asking them to wait 90 days. How much does that make them reconsider doing it? So that's my only concern with the 90-day wait of you can't do anything. So in that, I'd like to review the ordinance a little bit more before making any sort of decision, but the 30 days seems a little bit more reasonable than the 90.
We've had some demolition permits that we've looked at that's come in under our ordinance that was rushed through because their winter was coming and they were trying to beat certain times because if they had to have the environmentals out there, they had to have water out there to clean and then it would freeze. So the pieces weren't coming in right with some of that. So the timing of some of these with 90 days is a big difference if you're in winter or late spring.
Also wouldn't want to, create an undue burden on any kind of economic development or any private investment anywhere, but have we identified buildings that have a historic value in the city that may or may not be, maybe they're not within the historical district?
Well, I think that's always up to interpretation of whether they have historic value. I mean, I threw one into the mix, Branford. I mean, as Carlton said, it was a totally theoretical proposition on account of it is state property. But years ago when that was being considered, there was quite some discussion about making it a conference center, going private with it. That was a conversation years ago that some of you will remember. If it had gone that way, and then, the Griswold Hotel might be an example that's gone now, but there were people who felt it had historic value. So things like that could be, it's interpretation outside of a district, but. Sure. So I'm hearing, that we should probably present the changes and then people can consider them, but there is some support for going, at least some support for going to the 30 days. Am I correct in that summation? Okay,
Thank you.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you very much. So the other discussion that I'd like to have with you tonight before we move on to our new business is, again, something that has come up in a matter of timeliness. As you know, we have, well, some of you may not know, but we have a resolution that allows us to, an ordinance that allows us to make gap pay for people who are in the military, who leave us to go into, because they're in National Guard or something like that. And so we have an ordinance that allows for 180 days of gap pay and then an extension. And based on our reading of this ordinance, it doesn't say you can only have one extension, but it does say that in order to get your extension, you have to apply for it not less than 30 days in advance of the end of the initial 1-year period, which makes it sound like there's just one extension for up to 180 days. So we have an employee who is out on military service. We gave them 180 days. Then in March of 2016, you extended that by another 20 days. And when we found out how long this individual was going to be out, you extended that for another 120 days. So it was 180 and then 140 in effect. That gap pay runs out this Friday. There was not notification in the time that is outlined in the ordinance. It wasn't 30 days before the end. It wasn't, in fact, we only found out today what the time was. We heard last week that that the time was going to run out, but we didn't know how long his active duty was going to last. So my question to you is, in order for us to prepare so that we can, if you wish to extend this, get the resolutions to you in time, would you want to extend this again? We understand the individual will be out until at least March of 2017. So that would be more than 2 years that the individual would be out. Would you want to extend it again? What are your druthers? And we will bring it to you.
Well, I guess you'd want to know, was his extension mandatory or voluntary?
He's considered active, he's still under active military service. He's been called up and that military service is being extended. I don't know what the assignment is, but it's active military duty.
So he has no choice, he has to stay there.
I don't know how that works. I know they've designated that he's active military service. Do you have any additional information on that? Okay.
So we don't know his end date of his...
We know that, we found out today that the end date, well, it has been extended to March. Of course, it was extended last time to a certain date, and now we're going beyond that date. So I can't tell you for certain that that's when it's going to be. I can tell you that we have a date as of this time, which would be March of 2017. The question is whether you wish to extend. This does not prohibit that, but the way it's written, it contemplated one more 180-day extension. This goes well beyond that, so you need to think about whether you wish to do that.
I think there's no question if his military time has been extended, but if it's somebody who's going to keep re-up in the military, I mean, he could stay there till he retired.
Well, this is National Guard duty, so it's a matter of being called up.
I mean, I think if he's there because he has to be there, then I think we should pay him.
So what does have to happen is before you can extend his pay, you need to get a readout from what this is going to cost you, because it's a substantial cost associated with this. So you do get certain informations. But I'm sorry, Councilor Heed, did you have a question?
That's okay. Gap pay, I just want to know what that is. So
Okay, so the gap pay is the difference between what the military pays you and what our salary is. So that's called gap pay. So that, you would get that, you would before we would bring you any resolution on this, we would bring you what that's going to cost. Yes,
I'm just curious, I think maybe, I don't know if we can do this at committee of the whole or not, but it'd be good to hear from Lori about what has happened. I remember this scenario specifically. What's been past practice on this, and also if there's a deadline for it, was the employee notified, that you had to what was the process? Because if you just didn't put in your paperwork, that is concerning to me. I don't know what the process is for them to have to reapply for this, but.
so what it says is written notification will be made to the city council by the City of Groton Finance Director and the department head of the employee on active duty not less than 30 days in advance of the end of the initial 1-year period. So an attempt was made to reach out and prior to this, and we only got a definite date today.
But that was not the cause of the employee not. All I'm saying is if it was the employee who decided not to submit things on time, that's a different story than whether or not they weren't given
And
their
I can't
orders.
tell you that.
So I think that would at least make my opinion a little different on it. I mean, we've done this before, and I remember this case, and obviously if you're called up on military duty, like Councilor Garrish said, it's different than if you're making a decision, but also it's part of your responsibility as an employee to make sure your stuff is where it needs to be on time. But again, that not have been the employee's fault. If you didn't have the date, you couldn't put your paperwork in thinking maybe you were getting out on Friday, then you find out you're not. So I just want to know what the
We can see if we can find that out.
scenario is.
So at committee of the whole, you'd like Lori Sheets to come and talk with more particulars
Yeah.
about this particular case. Okay, I can, in terms of background, I believe this is the only individual who's ever had extended.
I remember.
I believe this is that correct? Can you remember anybody else who's ever?
I think it's really important that we support this family and that we support this employee while he's serving his country.
And that's fine. We just needed to know what your proclivity was, because it's not what's in here.
Well,
So
I agree with what Jill says, but I would want to know
whose choice it was.
whose choice was it.
Right, and that's kind of what my point was. I just want to know all the details before we make a decision, because, like I said, this person could have found out after the fact that he could be thinking he was getting out on Friday, and then they say, no, you're not.
I don't
So
think that was the case.
Right. So I'm just curious what the whole story is before we. I don't want to set up something that could become past practice that you could.
Gotcha.
So.
I don't think they get that option to say, oh, I want to stay another 6 months. I don't think that happens. I think he's probably been mandated.
No, but that's what I meant. I'm just curious if they were given if he was given the information, within that time period, versus if he figured I'm
As
going home.
opposed to who should have put in the application and who should have
Right.
done the notification.
I just want to make sure if we have a policy that we're doing everything correctly, so that in the future, if it comes up again, someone can't say, "Oh, well, you let this person."
Now the other question is, is that the gap pay ends this Friday. There'll be at least 2 weeks before you can vote on this. Is there anything you want to do in the interim?
Can we retro it? If we go forward and say yes, can it be retroactive back to the?
I don't see why it couldn't be.
Okay,
Yeah, it'd just be just like a union contract that
Right.
gets settled after.
right.
Okay, all right, so we will get you the information and bring it here. I'm sorry, Counselor Heed?
I have a cousin who's a major in the Army, and they can wait until the week before they tell him if he's getting his
Right.
promotion or he's being discharged.
Right.
So this would not, it doesn't sound like anything out of the ordinary to me.
Okay, so we'll find out the particulars. If it's too particular, we'll tell you in executive session rather than discuss personnel issues.
Sure.
Okay?
Well, and
All
even
right.
just one thing, even if Lori can get us the information, the answers to the questions, and it's okay to email it,
We don't do emails for information for meetings.
Okay, gotcha.
Because that then becomes a meeting.
Oh, that's right.
Or she could just provide a synopsis that the mayor.
Right, that's what I meant. So that then maybe we could act on it quicker, whatever. But as long as we get it.
Just wanted to know what your druthers were so that we could come up with a resolution if you wanted it. Okay. Committee referrals, are there any committee referrals? Seeing none, we'll go on to new business. Counselor Ilvento.
Thank you, Mayor. Resolution R 16-9-94. Therefore be it resolved, the mayor and council authorize and approve an agreement with Yankee Remodeler, 95 Truman Street, New London, Connecticut, for the defined scope of work as bid for the structural repairs to the property commonly referred to as the Mother Bailey House, 108 Thames Street, Groton, Connecticut, for a total base bid of $44,068.00 with supplemental bid work to be authorized by city personnel in accordance with the unit prices defined in the supplemental bid form to be paid from pending local capital improvement program LOTSIP funds and non-capital recurring fund. I so move.
Second.
So we gave you an update on this a little while ago. We had a couple of bids, but none of them were complete. We went out to bid again. The bids were reviewed by CME, who is the group that we have already contracted with to oversee the project, the management of the project. This is the lowest bid, and they confirmed with references and otherwise. Now you remember there are two parts to this. There's the base bid, which is the work as it was defined, but then there's the unit costs in case when they open the walls there's more than what they anticipated. Those would be approved as we went, but they would have to be approved by us. They couldn't just, say, oh, by golly, it came to $160,000. We didn't tell you. Every change order would have to be approved by us, but the bid, but we would accept what they provided for us as bids. Do you want to add anything more to that?
And the one thing that we are awaiting is the funding from the LOCIP grant. We submitted the application to the state for that, so that is the one piece too that's still outstanding. The approval from the state to use that.
Do we know how often they make those approvals?
I'm not sure the time frame.
Okay, okay.
I can look into that. And
Okay.
yeah.
I was a little surprised that we were doing this prior to getting a report from the committee.
Well, we talked about this along the way. We talked about this what happens eventually to the house is what the committee had to do with. This has to do with that structural repair on the front of the building where it's unstable.
Right,
Yes.
this is separate and distinct in that it's a stabilization of that front part, and then the committee will offer suggestions. What our suggestions are for the future of the building. But you still got to stabilize the building regardless of what the committee
Yeah,
puts in.
I know, we talked about that, but it just sounds to me like this is just the beginning of a lot of expense because there'll be other supplemental work probably that they will find. I mean, they're gonna find more stuff.
Well, they may find other stuff in the rest of the house, but this is very particular to a section of the house.
But I mean, they could find other stuff that they would say, this is not structurally safe and you should do this. And so it would be another
It would have to come back to the council.
40, 50,000, you know.
But also,
Yes.
sorry, thank you. I think also part of what's driving this is that we had a blight complaint, and now we're part of that. I mean, we were already looking at this before we got the blight complaint. But this is for the Boeing and the stabilization. That's what I'm looking at as being separate from the rest of the repair. Whatever happens down the road, whatever.
Right, I
We
know it's
decide.
separate, you know. But
Councilor Heed.
How much of the balance will be paid by LOCIP if that's approved?
Up to $49,500 would be paid for by LOCIP, and then anything above that amount would come from capital, from our non-recurring capital fund.
And the list of requests is in our packet.
Yes, Councilor Ilvento.
I just have two quick things. So, Ron, do we have any idea when we might know if we get that money? Because that could definitely change my opinion on this. If we know that lots of money could pay for this and it doesn't have to come out of our money.
It would be LOCIP money, not LOTSIP
Sorry,
money.
sorry.
LOTSIP is
I got that.
transportation.
Yeah, I got those mixed up.
Okay.
Sorry, Matt. Sorry. That would definitely change my opinion on this because it wouldn't come out of our money directly, which has been a concern for me. And also, just to point out, under 1.3A, it says 17th day of August 2012 on the first page of the contract. I'm sure it was just a typo, but I just wanted to let you know.
Where was that one at?
If you're on, it's under 1.3A, it says respectfully submitted this 17th day of August 2012. But then it has that correct date under 1.8. So, like I said, I'm sure it was just a typo, but just so you're aware.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining.
I'm gonna
Abstain.
abstain.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we had, council, we had 2 abstentions.
Yes. Three
Three
abstentions.
abstentions.
Then it doesn't pass. Okay, then we don't, I guess we wait for it to
Well,
vote.
the only-
We talked about this, though, a couple meetings ago, and
Right.
everybody said, well, if it's a matter of stabilization, we're gonna,
Well, but I've said all along how I felt about it, that until we had a clear plan for it, I didn't want to spend money. But my opinion could be changed depending on where the grant
well,
money
we can't
comes from.
spend it. We can't spend it if it doesn't come from LoCIP. You're only authorizing it if it comes from LoCIP.
My concern is that we are looking, the Mother Bailey Committee has already made a decision, and it just needs to be presented to us. I would rather hear what they have to say prior to saying yes.
How definitive is their recommendation? My understanding is, and that I wasn't there, is that it gives us all the options of what we could do.
Well, and I would rather look at all of those options prior to saying, yes, we should spend $44,068 without looking at those options first. And if that means it's a week from now, I'd rather wait a week
Okay?
and look it over and make an educated decision versus decide to spend this money and then have the Mother Bailey House come in a week and say, these are all of our
Can
recommendations.
we bring back the same resolution if it's been defeated? Only if the prevailing, we don't have a prevailing, only if we don't have a prevailing side, so.
I believe you can. I honestly don't know.
Okay. I don't think you're gonna get an answer in 2 weeks. My understanding of what they did was they gave us the whole list of things that we could consider to do, and they did not make a particular recommendation.
Ma'am,
Right? Yes, of course.
there are 3 main categories that they're gonna present in order of what we ranked them. But first category, I'm not gonna tell you what they are, but first category has two subs under it, second category has 2 subs, and then the third category is pretty much standalone. And they're gonna present them in that way, but basically you're gonna have 5 different options to pull from. So the committee is not gonna come and say, this is the one thing you should do. And a couple of the options require going after a HIP tag grant, which is a matching grant from us. 20,000 for the HIP tag and 20,000 for us,
Which you've already approved.
which we've already approved, right?
My concern has just been that, and now this is a little confusing to me, because I thought the whole purpose of that committee, of which members are on who came out and were upset about us doing whatever we want, spending money on the building and all, their definitive, if I'm correct, job was to make the recommendation of the use for the building, and then we would make the ultimate recommendation. So if you're coming back with a laundry list of things that we could have done that, and we did do that. So in the end, what was the purpose
Because
of the
they
committee?
well, the purpose of the committee was different than what they were able to achieve. They could not come to a single consensus. So my concern is that we talked about this a couple weeks ago. We had the council's approval to go forward. We've actually had these bidders make out yet another set of bids on this. You know, we even said, you know, don't have us go through this bidding process with these guys if that's not where you want to go. The message from the council was clearly, this is a stabilization issue, we should do it, and now we're saying, no.
That's
That's my concern. It just,
We're not saying no, I'm not saying no, I'm saying like Council Russ said, that I'd like to know what the committee has to say. What do they think of it? I've never been in the building. But,
They won't answer anything about stabilization because it was
Right.
not a question to them.
Right.
So they're not, their recommendations will say nothing about the
but
front
their-
wall.
Their whole purpose was to get back to us and tell us what their expert opinions were on what we should do with the building.
And they're going to give you choices.
Well, I'd like to know what those choices are before we start spending a lot of money on the place. If you're gonna tear it down, then why spend a whole bunch of money on it?
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Councilor.
but like, the issue was
Sheffield.
we needed to spend the money to just to stabilize the building itself, regardless of what
Oh, I
the
know that.
decision
I was
of.
here.
Yeah, so that's
But
why.
we also formed that committee.
For a totally different purpose.
Exactly, for a whole different reason.
And we've talked about that all along, that they were not going to
You
be.
interpreted it differently than I did, Steve, but that was what I thought. They were gonna get back to us.
But not on the issue of stabilization. It wasn't even a charge to them. But, okay, well, we can adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.